Next, it's a personal one. I get to introduce my beautiful nephew sitting beside me. Those of you who don't know him, his name's Paul Silva. He's a proud Dunghutti man, and he's also the nephew of David Dungay Jr, who was murdered, and I'll repeat that language, make sure you hear those words, who was murdered in Long Bay Correctional Facility in 2015. My nephew Paul Silva has been on the front line ever since, demanding for systemic changes and justice for Aboriginal deaths in custody, along with many, many other families that we've had in these 7 years past. So please welcome my beautiful nephew Paul Silva to the microphone. And just before he does speak, sorry, I forgot the most important part of the whole segment. When he speaks, my nephew, the footage of David Dungay Jr being murdered is going to be played. So before he plays it, I'm going to ask my nephew to give you a little pause. So if anyone is not willing or wanting, because I understand it's very traumatising, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So the actual murder of David Dungay you will witness tonight on footage when my nephew speaks. So just that's a heads up trigger warning for everybody. So thank you. Please welcome my nephew Paul.
First and foremost, I just want to thank Auntie Liz for having me on the panel. And I want to respect the elders past, present and emerging, and the lands we stand and gather on today. So my name is Paul Silva. I'm the nephew of David Dungay Jr, who was murdered by 6 corrective officers in Long Bay Correctional Facility in December of 2015. So just a little bit of insight for most of you here today that hasn't experienced the process of a death in custody. So it was the 29th of December when 3 police officers attended my family home in Kempsey, New South Wales. It was an inspector, senior constable and a constable. They knocked on the door and asked to speak to a family member. They explained that they had some news that they couldn't pass on to me at the time, and that we had to call back when someone would be available to, receive some tragic news. So police later attended and advised us basically that David Dungay Jr had died in Long Bay Correctional Facility, and that they wasn't to give out any details, and gave us a detective's number to contact. So we did so, and we confirmed details, and we was in so much disbelief considering that we was planning on picking him up in January. This happened on the 29th of December. So, losing someone under any circumstances is traumatic, but to get a phone call and to have police attend and describe to you that one of your family members is deceased is somewhat, it's something else. So basically, we was advised of the tragic circumstances, and we begin to go into, asking questions, like what happened, a million scenarios are going through our head. We called the detective, he couldn't give out any information. He just confirmed his name, date of birth, basically some identifying marks such as tattoos, etc. So I remember it was approximately maybe a week and a half later, we had the Department of Corrective Services investigation team attend a local police station, and they then investigated 3 of my relatives, being David's mother, older brother and 2 older sisters. So they interviewed him about his life on the outside. Take note that they was under tremendous stress and trauma at the time. They've just lost a loved one under no given insight to the event that has occurred. So basically, I've decided to, let the video be played here today to show you guys that are attending, what it means to me to continuously fight for, systemic change within the prisons and within the way police interact with, First Nations people and, people, just general people in the member of public. They get a power drive when they're interacting with people. When corrective officers and police officers wake up in the morning and put their badge and their gun on, they automatically get that, that power drive that they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. But if you interact with them you know, as a general member of the public, they won't treat you differently. They won't act like they've got that power and authority over you. They will sometimes treat you with dignity and respect. But when they've put that on there is a form of, you know, a form of power and a form of authority over you. And, you know, in saying that, my uncle David Dungay Jr died because these officers wanted to show them that this is their house. You live here with us. You know, we call the shots. If you don't want to listen, we'll roughen you up and we'll toughen you up. So, yeah, we'll let the footage play and, yeah, we'll be able to go from there. Okay, so yeah, basically the first time our family got to watch that video, it was on repeat, sitting in a coronial process. We sat down and they constantly rewind and replayed the video on a number of sections. You know, the coronial process will only give a family answers and supposedly put in policies and procedures that can prevent this from happening, that can prevent deaths in custody from happening. You know, we had a 1991 Royal Commission back in 1991, obviously, and they've implemented, or they've recommended a number of recommendations to be changed with policies and procedures. And, you know, I believe if every single one was implemented back then, there might have been a chance that David Dungay Jr would have been here today and I wouldn't be sitting here telling the tragic story. So we sat through a coronial process, and out of that process we got no justice, no accountability. You know, in my view and in many others, and even in senior criminal barrister Phillips Bolton's view, the officers involved in this video that we've just seen can be charged with assault and or manslaughter, but it's basically just up to the Department of Public Prosecutions to launch an investigation into the conduct of the corrective services, and we've demanded them on a number of occasions, and they've declined due to the fact that it wasn't a recommendation from the coronial process. You know, there needs to be more done around deaths in custody. You know, in my view, it's a stolen generation. Instead of killing us in mass numbers, they're doing it one by one behind closed doors where they will continuously get away with it. The coronial process found that David Dungay was no security threat to the corrective officers, and he was no medical emergency to himself. Therefore, there was no reason for corrective officers to storm the building. And that takes it back to the show of authority and power that they abused when they put their gun and their badges on. They wanted to show him that, you know, this is how we're going to deal with you. You know, a matter of fact, the girl screw that actually locked him in there was, hopefully I explain this the right way, the girl screw that put David Dungay in the cell before the IAT team arrived, the head of the IAT team was her husband. So in my view and in my beliefs, if David Dungay Jr is swearing at this girl screw, she's under the impression, okay, well, I'll go and get my husband, who's the head of the riot squad, to come back here and you up. And as a result, it cost him his life. You know, the major thing is, like, they was concerned that the biscuits would kill him. They was concerned that the biscuits would have an effect and that they would, put him into a diabetic episode. He's treated his diabetics for many years, and he knows how to treat it. He knew what he was doing was right, but it was just a simple show of force and abuse of authority against David that they wanted to show. I recently been contacted by some people within the facility that know David, and I was told that he wouldn't take a step back and he wouldn't, stand down or put up or take from corrective officers. Maybe that day he just had enough and he wanted to call it out for what it was. Despite his begs that he could not breathe, they still held him down. Now, I don't know how any human being in this society can do it. You have to be one evil person to do something like that, to hold someone down and listen to them continuously say that they can't breathe, and to continuously do what you did is just, that is just on a whole new level. So basically, after the tragic event, our family wanted to demand justice and demand answers, and that we did. We started off attending Long Bay Correctional Facility with 30 people, 40 people, attending the Justice for David Dungay, and then we had, unfortunately, something that had to happen in the US infiltrated a massive movement in 2020. And at that movement, I made it very clear that we need to realise what actually happens in our own backyard before we, before we support and put all our power into something that really won't make change for our people and our First Nations people back home. I was grateful for the turnout and support back then, and it did raise a lot of awareness, but, that energy and that effort needs to be done on a daily basis, to continuously demand justice. And, our family have sat through the New South Wales parliamentary inquiry, which was done in 2021. And out of that, it was just a repeat of the 1991 Royal Commission. Deaths in custody are still happening. Indigenous peoples are being bashed on the streets, losing their lives. People are being hit by police cars. We live in a society where you're treated based off your character. You're treated based off the colour of your skin. Many families have demanded and yelled at the top of their lungs with what they want in regards to deaths in custody. We want an independent Aboriginal body to investigate future Aboriginal deaths in custody. I don't want future Aboriginal deaths in custody, but I say it because these people that wear the gun and the badges, they're going to continuously brutalising the First Nations people, without a doubt. I sit here and speak about it today. Within the next month, unfortunately, there's probably going to be another death in custody. And it's the plain reality of it until we, really, like, we're really trying to do something. Believe it or not, there is really stuff trying to happen, but until the government actually gives and actually fucks off and gives our land back, and, where we can write our own books, where we can be the author of our future, that's what we need. We don't need any other people that sit up in a chair for wealth, to continuous ongoing trauma against the First Nations people. It's just, I can't come to terms, like, the system was built against us, so it's not built to benefit us in any single way, shape or form, and it will forever be that way. And like, back to the coronial system, that is just another process that will, put trauma onto your family. You will gain some answers, and you will gain some sort of answers in regards to your loved one dying, but in reality, you're not really getting any justice or accountability, and those individuals involved are not held accountable. In fact, the people that killed David Dungay was promoted 2 weeks after he died. Exactly, and like Brother just said, they all seem to do. And I've seen that ever since after David's death, and probably even before. When they kill someone, the week after, they're promoted. And that is to save their employment, to say, look, okay, they're a sergeant now. Maybe they could go back down to senior constable. David died from something called, positional asphyxia. It's when you're held down in a prone position, which is on your stomach. One of the officers was trained in positional asphyxia, and the signs and symptoms is gargling of breath, screaming that you can't breathe, heavy breathing. Now, David showed all three symptoms. The guard trained in that positional asphyxia didn't try to stop the other guards to say, hey, his lips are turning blue. Hey, he's showing three signs of positional asphyxia where we could lose him. The cause of death was a cardiac arrhythmia, so a heart attack. But underlining that is use of force was a contributing factor. Now, if you take the use of force away, David would still be alive, because I could almost guarantee if he ate the biscuits and 6 people didn't jump on top of him and hold him down, he wouldn't have had a heart attack. He's a 26-year-old male. We sit through, we see racism on a daily basis living in a society. It's hard. It's a constant battle, being black. And it's something that, I'm very, very determined to do, is to make change, for the First Nations people. But, for all people, when human rights is under attack, every human is under attack. And I've seen many people if I see someone being treated differently or out of perspective for their character, I'm a person to stand up and point it out and call it for what it is, because and that's what we need to do in society more. If you see something out of place, you see someone being treated wrongly based off their character, something else or rather, stand up, call it out for what it is. Don't crawl back in a shell. It's about time. We've been quiet for too long. Hence the reason why we'll continue until, there's justice for David Dungay Jr. until we go on without deaths in custody. Until there's more preventions put in place without throwing the First Nations person in custody. If you're black, you're more likely guilty until proven innocent. If you're white, you're innocent until proven guilty. And I've seen that firsthand. For an offensive language charge against police, I'm more likely to be thrown in the back of a paddy wagon and brutalised against. It happened to my brother probably 2 months ago. They locked him and another white bloke up, took them both back to the cell. They let the white bloke out with a fine. They kept my brother in custody because he was the brother of Paul Silva. Now, this was around the time when the Black Lives Matter stuff was happening. So, that says some profiling that happens, from the cops. In regards to deaths in custody, there needs to be more investigations. We can't have police investigating police, because that just doesn't sound right. At the end of the day, they're gonna cover up for their colleagues, and they're gonna protect them, from the get-go. And all of the CCTV footage in regards to David's event, most of it went missing. The wall-mounted cameras that was in the cell, after that handheld camera got turned off, all of those went missing. It was an hour and a half worth of footage that went missing. So basically, after that video, he takes his last breath, and then the public can't see it. But after that, the guards say, oh, he's dead, he's gone. Oh, he's dead, he's gone. They chuck him on the ground, handcuffed behind his back. They don't touch him for approximately 8 minutes. No resuscitations, no checking for anything. They just throw him on the ground, look at him, he's dead, he's gone, he's dead, he's gone. And then they start CPR, but they do it inaccurately. They try to suck all of the saliva and biscuits out of his mouth, but they've got a cap on it, so all they've did was just compress it all together like a hard brick, hence the reason why he couldn't come back alive. And then what really got me at the end of the video is the corrective officer recording. He would say, this video concludes at 3:42 p.m. and he giggles. And he says to his team of IAT officers, "Don't worry guys, the ambulance are here now. They've got it." He giggled after he just made someone come unresponsive and die on the ground in front of them. You know, and then he turned the camera off, and then once that camera went off, every single wall-mounted camera that was attached mysteriously went missing. So we could not see what they did with David's body. We could not see what the evidence they cleaned up. A matter of fact, they had someone else in the cell that they moved him to. The cell when they moved him from cell 71 to cell 77, before he even got to 77, they already had an inmate back in 71. There was an inmate in cell 71 before he was even dead. So the crime scene was already tampered with and exposed. They put an inmate in there with David's blood still on the ground. You know, I don't know when this system is going to give, and maybe it's when TNT blows it off the fucking earth, but I'm not giving up until they put me in the ground and until my uncle, because at the moment I know it's almost, you know, this happened in 2015, it's almost 7 years on. Now I know my uncle ain't resting, and I know that he's in his grave and he's waiting for me to get justice, and he's waiting for, you know, for those to be held accountable, because he was literally coming home in January. It happened on the 29th of December. I was planning to pick him up, and instead we have police tell us the tragic circumstances. You know, it is a real eye-opener when you're exposed to stuff like this and Indigenous issues and Aboriginal issues. Me personally, you know, for myself it seems bad to say I had no insight on Aboriginal deaths in custody before it happened to me. And in some circumstances, for you to know something, it needs to happen to you. And after I was exposed to that, my eyes didn't just open up on how this system's built against us, but it opened up on how society is ran and how we constantly, when we wake up and open our eyes, we know that that day is going to be a battle. We know that we're going to face something that we've got to get over. We know that, you know, we're going to face racism in any way, shape or form throughout the day. Even if it means paying for petrol and they say, "Good morning, how's your day going?" to the white person in front of you. But then when you go to pay, they say, "Oh, pump 7, that's for $50. Well, where's my good day? How am I going? You know, why didn't you say it to me? What's different between them and me? The only thing that I could see is my skin's black, they're Caucasian. Because at the end of the day, we breathe the same air, we bleed the same, we all have the same feelings. Why are we being treated differently? Because, like brother said, they're trained from the start, from when they're born, to hate the First Nations people. They want to continuously keep us divided. You know, there needs to come a time when deaths in custody stop, when we get our land back, and when they hand the governmency back over to the First Nations people, you know, and that's what we need. And yeah, like basically, like I say, I'm going to continuously fight for justice for my uncle and until there's systematic change, until it stops happening, and for justice and accountability for my uncle, because I definitely know that he's not resting, and he's waiting for the day for those 6 officers to be held accountable for their actions. And yeah.
We'll leave it there, I think. I'll just butt right in and leave it right there.